You spend your whole life demanding answers from the universe while carefully avoiding the one question that actually matters. And that avoidance is precisely what keeps you stuck. The question: neither science nor you can escape. We build entire lives around finding answers, but we never stop to ask if we're asking the right questions in the first place. You know what's funny? You'll spend 3 hours researching the best mattress to buy, read 17 articles about whether you should learn Python or JavaScript, and lose entire weekends comparing career paths on Reddit. But you won't spend 15 honest minutes asking yourself what you actually want your life to feel like when you wake up in the morning. I know this because I've done it. We all do it. We treat our lives like a massive optimization problem, where if we just gather enough data, read enough books, listen to enough podcasts, we'll finally crack the code. We'll finally know what to do. And then, with all that knowledge locked and loaded, we'll transform into the person we're supposed to be. Except it never works that way. You know why? Because you're asking the wrong question entirely. You're asking, what should I do? When the real question, the one that actually changes things, is, what am I doing this for? Stay with me for the next 15 minutes, and I promise you'll understand why every answer you've been chasing has left you more confused than before. And what question you need to ask instead if you ever want to feel like your life is actually yours. We live in a culture that worships answers, productivity hacks, life optimization, 5 steps to this, 7 secrets to that. The algorithm feeds you solutions to problems you didn't even know you had until the video title told you. And here's the trap. The more answers you collect, the more you believe you're making progress. But you're not making progress. You're building a beautiful prison out of other people's certainties. Think about it. When was the last time you made a major life decision based on what you genuinely wanted versus what seemed like the smart or responsible or optimal choice? When did you last do something just because it felt right in your bones, without needing 3 articles and a pros and cons list to validate it? You probably can't remember. Because somewhere along the way, you learned that trusting yourself was dangerous, that your instincts couldn't be trusted, that the real answers lived out there, in books, in experts, in people who seemed more successful or more together than you. So, you outsourced your life. You handed the steering wheel to a committee of voices, your parents' expectations, your industry standards, your friends' lifestyles, the internet's opinions. And now you're confused why you feel like a passenger in your own existence. Here's the uncomfortable part. Nobody forced you into this. You chose it. Because asking other people what to do is so much easier than asking yourself what you want. Because following a template is less terrifying than admitting you have to write your own script. Because being productive and optimized lets you feel like you're moving forward, even when you're just running in circles inside someone else's maze. You think you're searching for answers, but really, you're just avoiding the question. I remember sitting in a coffee shop 3 years ago, laptop open, 7 tabs of career advice articles glowing at me like little digital prophets. I'd been in the same job for 4 years. Good salary, decent people. The kind of position your parents brag about at dinner parties. And I was completely dead inside. But instead of asking myself why I felt that way, I was researching signs you should change careers and how to know if you're in the wrong field. I wanted someone, anyone, to tell me what to do, to give me permission, to hand me a checklist that would make the decision for me. My friend Marco showed up, ordered his coffee, glanced at my screen, and said, "You know you're doing it again, right?" Doing what? Asking the internet to tell you how you feel. I tried to defend myself. Told him I was just gathering information, being thorough, making an informed decision. All the things you're supposed to say when you're pretending research is the same thing as courage. He just looked at me and asked, "Okay, but what do you actually want?" And I froze. Because I had no idea. I'd spent so long asking what I should want, what made sense to want, what successful people wanted, that I'd completely lost track of what I wanted. My own desires had become background noise, drowned out by the symphony of everyone else's advice. That's when something shifted. Not dramatically. I didn't quit my job that day, or have some movie moment epiphany. But I started asking myself different questions. Not, what's the right move? But, what would make me feel alive? Not, what should I do? But, what am I actually willing to sacrifice for? And when I finally changed jobs 6 months later, it wasn't because an article told me to. It was because I'd finally admitted what I'd been avoiding. I didn't want to be impressive. I wanted to be interested. Those are not the same thing. And I'd wasted years chasing the first while secretly dying for the second. Here's where we need to talk about Socrates, and I promise I'll make this more interesting than your high school philosophy class. Socrates walked around ancient Athens basically annoying everyone by asking them to define things they thought they understood. Justice, courage, virtue, wisdom. He'd find the most confident people in the city, politicians, teachers, self-proclaimed experts, and just keep asking, "But what do you mean by that?" until they realized they had no idea what they were talking about. He wasn't doing this to be a jerk, though I'm sure people thought he was. He was doing it because he understood something crucial. Most people live their entire lives based on beliefs they've never actually examined. They inherit definitions from their culture, their family, their era, and then spend decades making decisions based on ideas they've never questioned. His famous line was, "The unexamined life is not worth living." But here's what that actually means, stripped of the philosophical jargon. If you never stop to ask yourself why you believe what you believe, you're not living your life. You're living someone else's script on autopilot. Ancient Athens was basically Instagram before Instagram existed. Everyone was performing virtue, performing wisdom, performing success. They had the right opinions, the right friends, the right public image. And Socrates walked around pointing out that underneath all that performance, nobody actually knew what they were doing or why. Sound familiar? The Athenians eventually got so annoyed with him that they sentenced him to death. Because here's the thing about asking real questions. They make people uncomfortable. They threaten the whole structure of unexamined certainties that everyone's built their lives on. It's easier to kill the person asking the questions than to face the answers. You're not going to get sentenced to death for examining your life. But you are going to face something scarier. The possibility that everything you've been working toward was based on questions you never actually agreed were worth asking. So, here's how the real world actually works, underneath all the productivity porn and self-help platitudes. Principle 1. The quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions you ask, not the quantity of answers you collect. You can have 1,000 answers to the wrong questions and still be completely lost. Principle 2. Most people never ask themselves what they actually want because they're terrified the answer will require them to change everything. So they stay busy asking smaller, safer questions that don't threaten the status quo. Principle 3. The system, whether that's your workplace, your family, your culture, or the algorithm, benefits from you asking the questions it wants you to ask. How can I be more productive? Keeps you grinding. What should I achieve next? Keeps you chasing. Am I doing enough? Keeps you anxious and compliant. None of these questions lead to freedom. They lead to optimization within someone else's game. Principle 4. Clarity doesn't come from information. It comes from confrontation. You have to sit in the uncomfortable silence and ask yourself the questions you've been avoiding, even when, especially when, you're afraid of what you'll discover. Principle 5. The question, "What do I want?" is 10 times more powerful than "What should I do?" because it forces you to take ownership. Should implies there's a correct answer out there. Want implies you have to decide what matters to you, regardless of whether it's correct. This is why you feel stuck. Not because you lack information, but because you've been asking servant questions. Questions that keep you subordinate to systems, expectations, and other people's priorities. You need to start asking sovereign questions. Questions that make you the author of your own life, even when the answers are inconvenient. All right, so what does this actually look like in practice? Because philosophy is useless if it doesn't change your Tuesday morning. First, you need to audit your questions. Take out a piece of paper, yes, actually do this, and write down the questions you've been asking yourself lately. About your job, your relationships, your future. Write them exactly as they appear in your head. Now look at them carefully. How many of those questions are about what you should do versus what you want to do? How many are about meeting expectations versus exploring desires? How many keep you inside the framework you're trying to escape? If most of your questions sound like, how can I be better at this thing I'm not sure I even want? Or, what's the most strategic move? Or, what will people think? Congratulations, you've identified the problem. Second, start asking the uncomfortable questions. Not as a thought experiment, not as journal prompts you'll write down and ignore, as real inquiries that demand real answers. Try these. What do I actually want my days to feel like? Not what do I want to achieve, but what do I want to experience? What am I doing right now purely because I think I'm supposed to, not because it connects to anything I genuinely value? If I had 10 years to live, would I spend them the way I'm spending them now? And if not, what does that tell me? These questions are going to make you uncomfortable. They should. Comfort is what got you here. Third, stop asking permission. Every time you catch yourself researching whether your desire is valid, whether other people have successfully done what you're considering, whether it's the right move, stop. You're doing it again. You're outsourcing your authority. Nobody can tell you what your life should feel like. They can tell you what worked for them. They can tell you what the conventional path looks like, but they cannot tell you what matters to you. That's your job. And it's not a job you can delegate. Fourth, build a practice of sitting with uncertainty instead of immediately reaching for answers. When you feel the urge to Google your way out of a difficult decision, pause. Sit there. Let the question breathe. See what emerges when you're not frantically stuffing the silence with other people's voices. This isn't meditation guru nonsense. This is recognizing that your own inner clarity has been drowned out by constant input, and you need to create space for it to speak again. And finally, accept that asking the real questions will change your life in ways you can't predict or control. That's the point. You're not trying to optimize your current situation. You're trying to discover if your current situation is even the one you want to be in. Here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. You've been avoiding the real questions because you already know the answers would require you to change. And change is terrifying. It means admitting you've been wrong. It means disappointing people. It means walking away from investments of time and energy and identity. It means entering uncertainty with no guarantee of success. So you stay busy. You keep collecting answers to smaller questions. You keep optimizing a life you're not sure you want, because that feels like progress, and progress feels safe, even when it's progress toward nothing that matters to you. But here's the reframe. The fact that you're afraid of the answers doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. Everyone is terrified of sitting down with themselves and asking, is this what I actually want, or just what I've been told to want? Everyone is scared that the answer might blow up their life. The difference is, some people ask anyway. And those people, the ones who ask the real questions and sit with the uncomfortable answers, they're not happier because they have it all figured out. They're not more successful by conventional measures. They're not living perfect, Instagram-worthy existences. They're just more alive. Because they've stopped living defensively, stopped optimizing for other people's metrics, stopped asking permission to want what they want. They've accepted that life is not a problem to be solved with enough research. It's a question to be lived with enough courage. Picture this, you 10 years from now. You can go one of two ways. In the first version, you're still asking the same questions you're asking now. Still researching the perfect move. Still waiting for certainty. Still optimized, still productive, still stuck. You'll have checked all the boxes, and you'll wonder why it feels so hollow. In the second version, you asked the hard questions. You sat with the discomfort. You made choices based on what you wanted, not what you should want. And yeah, maybe it didn't all work out perfectly. Maybe some people didn't understand. Maybe you had to rebuild things you thought were permanent. But you're living a life that's actually yours, not a rough draft of someone else's vision, not an optimized version of someone else's dream. Yours. So here's the question I'll leave you with. Are you going to keep collecting answers, or are you finally going to ask yourself what you're actually searching for? Are you going to keep asking, "What should I do?" Or are you brave enough to ask, "What do I want?" Because that second question, that's the one that changes everything. And you already know it. You've always known it. You've just been afraid to ask.